Meanwhile, the actual soul life continued to run its course in the form of dreamlike pictures. Color pictures came and went in this life, without having any particular connection with the things of the outer world, and these color pictures were still attributed by man to soul activities. Light color pictures appeared to him when his astral experiences were pleasant, somber pictures when he was affected by disagreeable astral influences. That which was affected as the result of self-generated heat, we have called in the foregoing the inner life. Nevertheless, we see that it was not an inner life in the sense of later human development. All things advance step by step, and so does the evolution of the inner life. In the sense in which it has been spoken of in a former chapter, this true inner life only begins when the fructification by the mind takes place, when man begins to think about these outer influences. All that has been described here does but show how man climbed upward to the state depicted in the preceding chapter. And we really live over again the times there described when we picture to ourselves the following. More and more the soul learns to relate to the outer bodily existence, that which it formerly lived through in itself, and which it only attributed to soul influences. The same thing now happened with regard to the color pictures. Just as before, the impression of a sympathetic psychic influence was connected in the individual soul with a bright color picture, so did it now become a brilliant light impression from outside. The soul began to perceive in colors the objects surrounding it. This was in conjunction with the development of new organs of sight. At its previous stages, the body had one eye, which does not exist today, by means of which it vaguely sensed the light and the darkness. The legend of the Cyclops with one eye is a reminiscence of this state. The two eyes developed when the soul began to associate the external light impressions more intimately with its own life, and thus was lost the capacity of perception of the surrounding astral world. The soul became more and more a mirror of the outer world, the latter being reproduced within it as an image. And simultaneously with this, the separation of the sexes appeared. On the one hand, the human body became capable of fecundation only by another human being, while on the other hand, there developed in the body soul organs, the nervous system, by which the sense impressions of the outer world were reflected in the soul, thereby preparing the way for the mind, or thinking principle, in the human body. The origin of this etheric earth will be explained in another chapter. The astral human beings drew this ether round them, imprinting on it, as it were, their own nature, so that it became a copy of the astral human being. Thus, at the first stage, we have to deal with an etheric earth, which is really only composed of this etheric humanity, and is nothing but a conglomerate of it. The astral body, or soul of man, is actually, for the most part, outside the etheric body and organizes it from without. To the occult investigator, the earth appears somewhat as follows. It is a sphere composed in its turn of countless tiny etheric spheres, etheric humanity, and surrounded by an astral covering, as the present earth is surrounded by a covering of air. In this astral envelope atmosphere, astral humanity lives, and from there it works on its etheric images. The astral human souls create organs in their etheric images, in whom they affect a human etheric existence. Within the whole earth there is only one condition of matter, and that is the subtle vital ether. This primeval humanity is called in theosophical books the polar, or first, root race. The further evolution of the earth now consists in the development of the one condition of matter into two. A denser matter separates off, leaving a finer substance behind. The denser substance is similar to our air, while the finer substance resembles that which affects the formation of chemical elements from their previously undifferentiated substance. In addition to these, a remnant of the earlier matter, the vitalized ether, continued to exist. Only a part of the latter was incorporated with the two conditions of matter just described. We find, then, at this time three kinds of matter in the physical earth. While formerly the activities of the astral human beings were confined to one substance in the earth shell, they now had to work upon three, their work being carried on in the following manner. That part which had become gaseous at first offered resistance to the work of the astral beings. It would not assimilate all the latent possibilities contained in the perfect astral beings. Consequently, the astral humanity is forced to divide into two groups. One group is that which elaborates the gaseous matter and creates in it its own image. The other group is able to do more. It can work upon the two other kinds of matter. It can create an image of itself, composed both of the vitalized ether and the other kind of ether, thus giving rise to the chemical elements. In the present work, we shall call this kind of ether chemical ether. But this second group of astral beings has only acquired this higher faculty by throwing off a part, the first group, of the astral essence, and condemning it to perform lower work. Had it retained in itself those forces which accomplished the meaner task, it could not have risen higher itself. Here we have an event arising from the fact that something higher procures its own advancement at the cost of another, which it severs from itself. This is the picture which now presents itself within the physical earth. Two kinds of beings exist. Firstly, those having a gaseous body, on which astral beings belonging to it work from outside. These beings are of the nature of animals, and form a first animal kingdom on the earth. Were we to describe the forms of these animals, the man of today would think them rather strange. Their form, we must bear in mind that it consisted only of gaseous substance, resembles none of the animal forms existing now. They have perhaps a distant resemblance to the shells of certain snails or shellfish of the present day. Side by side with these animal forms, man's physical development progresses. Astral humanity, now risen a step higher, creates a physical image of itself consisting of two kinds of matter, of vital ether and of chemical ether. Thus we have before us a human being consisting of an astral body who is working upon an etheric body, which is again composed of two kinds of ether, vital and chemical ether. By means of the life ether, this physical image of man has the power of reproduction, of bringing forth beings like itself. By means of the chemical ether, it develops certain forces similar to the chemical forces known to us at the present day as attraction and repulsion. Thereby, this human image has the power of attracting certain substances in its surroundings and of uniting them with itself, afterwards to throw them out again by the power of repulsion. Such matter can, of course, only be drawn from the animal kingdom described above and from the human kingdom. Here we discover the origin of nutrition. These first human images were thus animal and man-eaters. There still existed simultaneously with these the descendants of the former, merely life-ether beings, but they became stunted, having to adapt themselves to the new terrestrial conditions. From these are formed at a later period, after many transformations undergone by them, the unicellular creatures, as also the cells which afterwards went to the formation of the more complicated beings. The next step forward is this. The gaseous matter divides in two, the denser part becoming watery and the other remaining gaseous. But the chemical ether also divides into two conditions of matter. The one becomes denser and forms what we shall here call light ether. It confers on the beings in whom it is contained the gift of becoming luminous. But a part of the chemical ether retains its original form. We have henceforth to deal with a physical earth composed of the following kinds of matter: water, air, light ether, chemical ether, and life ether. Now, to enable the astral beings to influence these kinds of matter again, another occurrence takes place, involving the progress of something higher at the expense of something lower thrown off from it. This process gives rise to physical beings of the character we shall now describe. Firstly, there were those whose physical body was made up of water and air, who are now worked upon by coarse astral beings belonging to those who had been thrown out. So there arises a new group of animals composed of denser matter than the former ones. Secondly, another new group of physical beings came into existence, possessing a body which may consist of air and light ether mixed with water. These are plant-like beings, but differing greatly in form from the plants of the present time. Only in the third new group do we find the man of that time represented. His physical body is composed of three kinds of ether, light ether, chemical ether, and life ether. When we consider that descendants of the old groups still continue to exist, we can gauge the multiplicity of living beings which already existed when our Earth was at that stage of development. A momentous cosmic event here occurs. The sun withdraws, and simultaneously, certain forces leave the Earth altogether. These forces are composed of a part of that which was present on the earth hitherto, in the form of life, chemical, and light ether. Thus these forces were withdrawn, as it were, from the earth as it had existed up to the present. Thereby, a radical change took place in all the groups of terrestrial beings who had hitherto contained these forces within themselves. They underwent transformation. The first to be so transformed were what we called above the plant beings, who were deprived of the forces they had possessed by means of the light ether, so that they could now only develop as living beings when acted upon from without by the light forces taken from them, and in this way plants came under the influence of sunlight. Something of a similar nature happened to the human bodies as well. Their light ether had to cooperate henceforth with the light ether of the sun in order to be capable of life. But not only those beings from whom the light ether had been directly withdrawn were affected. Others were also influenced, for everything in the world works together. The animal forms too, which did not themselves contain light ether, had once been irradiated by their fellow beings on the earth, and developed under the influence of the light received from them, and they now came also indirectly under the influence of the sun from without. The human body, however, in particular, developed organs which are susceptible to the sunlight, the first rudiments of the human eye. The result of the sun's separation was a further condensation of the matter of the earth. Solid matter began to develop from the liquid. In like manner, the light ether differentiates into a second kind of light ether and an ether which enables bodies to develop warmth. The earth thus becomes a being which generates heat within itself. All its inhabitants were brought under the influence of heat. Again, in the astral world, a similar process to the former one must occur. Certain beings progressed at the expense of others. A certain number of beings, suited to work upon the gross solid matter, were separated off. And this was the origin of the firm skeleton of the earth, the mineral kingdom. At first, the higher kingdoms of nature did not all exercise their influence on this solid, mineral, bony mass, so that we find on the earth a mineral kingdom which is hard and a vegetable kingdom in which the densest matter is water and air. For in this kingdom, the gaseous body itself had been densified to a water body by the events described. And besides these, there were animals of the most multifarious forms, some with water and some with air bodies. The human body itself had undergone a process of densification. Its firmest corporeality had solidified to the density of water. The heat ether having arisen, this water body of man's was pervaded by it, imparting to it a kind of matter which might perhaps be described as of the nature of gas. This condition of matter of the human body is described in works on occult science as that of fire mist. In this body of fire mist man was incorporated.